Cyber Friday is back, and in this video, I'll be showing you how to compile a kernel for your Android phone. So basically, this video is divided into three parts. The first part will be the information part, where I'll be telling you what is kernel sources, and how kernel flashing works, and what are the importance of kernels and everything that you need to know. In the second part, what we are going to do is we are going to compile a kernel for a phone. We are actually going to port a kernel from Android 13 to Android 16, and then I'll also show you how you can compile a kernel for your device from a source tree. So without wasting time, let's start with the video. The first part is all about information. So what is kernel? A kernel is something that allows your hardware to work with your software. Let's say, for example, if you are running an Android phone, inside that Linux already has a kernel. So basically what happens is, if you are trying to turn on Bluetooth or let's say Wi-Fi of your device, the software part, when you hit the button of the Wi-Fi, it basically communicates with the hardware to turn on the Wi-Fi. So that is where the kernel takes the place of communication between the OS and the hardware. Now there is something called kernel or source tree. So source tree is basically something like, your example would be a source code that is released by the vendor. Let's say, for example, I have Google Pixel. So for that, the source tree would be given by Google, and Android source tree. It basically has all the source codes of the kernel. Okay. Now kernel has various versions, and depending on the operating system, the kernel is different. So for example, in my case, I have a Nothing Phone 1, which I usually use for Android testing, and this phone basically has the vendor has provided Android 15, but for Kali Nethunter, the version for Nethunter is Android 13. Okay, now let's talk about Kali Nethunter. Kali Nethunter has a lot of tools, and the most important that I personally like is the HID attack, which basically your phone works like a keyboard. And the second one is the Wi-Fi injection mode, where the Wi-Fi card, basically the adapter goes into monitor mode, and then you can use it. So to use these features, a kernel is required that is patched with the HID attack and this Wi-Fi injection attack. So for that, I have to install a Kali Nethunter kernel. Now, by default, as I told you, official update that was given on stock ROM on my phone, on Nothing Phone 1, was Android 15, and Kali Linux has Android 13 kernel for my phone. So there is something called code name. A code name, a special code name is assigned to each device while developing. Developers use this code name. So for Nothing Phone 1, it is spaceware. And I would also like to tell you that to compile a kernel, you need the kernel sources. And once you compile the kernel, you actually have to flash it before the operating system, that is as a bootloader, and you have to flash it using a custom recovery. Now, what is stock recovery or stock ROM? Stock ROM is basically something, the operating system that comes pre-installed on your phone, and a stock kernel is basically the same thing which comes pre-installed by the vendor. Whenever you turn on your phone, that is something that comes with it. Now a custom recovery like TWRP is required to flash any custom ROM, and for that you need to have TWRP or CWM recovery. I've made a separate video on recoveries and everything. If you want, if you have missed that, you can go back and watch it. But for now, there are few things required. Nothing Phone 1 does not have a custom recovery. So what I'll be doing is, I'll be creating a kernel, I'll be porting a kernel. By default, there is Android 13 port available. I'll be using that, and then we'll be porting the kernel for Android 16 and flashing it on the device. So Kali Linux Nethunter already has something called Nethunter kernel builder. And what you have to do is, you have to get the sources, you just have to align the sources, and then you are ready to go with the porting. And then you can also add in some patches. Let's say, depending on the Linux kernel version, let's say if you're running some 3.x or 4.x, whatever version you are running, depending on that, you actually have to flash certain patches on your kernel, and Kali Nethunter kernel builder does it for you. In this video, I'll also show you how you can flash the device. I already have created a video for rooting the device, what is fast boot, what is custom recovery. Everything is explained in a previous video. If you have missed that, then go to my profile and check the previous video for detailed explanation on how things works. And for me, Nothing Phone 1 does not have a custom recovery. TWRP is not available. Plus, unofficial releases of custom recovery is also not there. So what I'll be doing is I'll be using something called Lineage OS, which is again Android based OS, but it has the sources available for my phone. And then I'll be building those kernels. I'll be basically using those kernel sources, and I'll be using Kali Linux nethunter kernel source. I'll be merging both of them and then compiling it for Kali Linux nethunter kernel. Android 14 is something that I'll be using, and I'll be porting Android 14 to 15 and then to 16 using the patches. So let's see practically how you can do it and how you need to do for your phone. Even if you don't have the kernel available or the kernel sources available, I'll be showing it to you. Usually in 99% of the cases, your phone sources will be available. Either you can search on official vendor page or GitHub, or maybe if you are good, you can search on XDA developers. Just create an account on XDA developers, select your phone, and inside the forum you will find a lot of people talking about the sources and custom ROMs. So without wasting time, let's go and let's do it practically. So first step is to unlock the bootloader and root your device. You can either use Magix or whatever exploit is available for your specific phone that is required, because if you don't have root access, or if your OEM unlock, or your phone is not unlocked, in that case you won't be able to modify. So first thing is, what is Kali Net Hunter? So Kali Net Hunter is original Kali Linux for your phone ported, and there are few things that you can do, like your phone actually works like a keyboard, and you can use it to basically perform HID attacks. Your Wi-Fi card, your monitor mode is enabled in your Wi-Fi adapter that allows you for packet injection and to capture packets, and Wi-Fi card basically supports injection mode. And there are three variants of Kali Linux available. First one is the light variant, the second and the third. I have already made a video on how to install it rootless on any phone. If you don't want to modify your phone or work with a rootless version, please check that video. But there are some limitations, some features won't work. So as you can see, you can just go to the repository where all the devices are available, and you can check these repository. By the way, the source code for all the apps is also available in this repository, as well as the kernel sources are available. So inside build script, you will find something called kernel builder, and inside the kernel builder, you will be able to see various Android versions, and inside each Android version, you will be able to see which devices are supported. So by default, if you talk about my phone, the vendor has provided Android 15 update, but we'll be flashing it for Android 16. So if you just go into the 14, you will notice that a lot of phones are supported, and the name of the phone is basically Space War. For my device, this is the code name for the developers, and as you can see, it is not available in Android 14 or 15 and 16 either. So we have the Spaceware kernel available. Kali Net Hunter Space for Spaceware is available for Android 13. Now you can either recompile the kernel or you can build it from scratch. I'll be showing both the things in this video. So for example, you can just go on the page and you can check if your device is supported. If not supported, don't worry, I'll be explaining how you can compile it. Now to install the nethunter on top of your Android, you have some prerequisites that is required. First one is you need to have a custom recovery, and DM verify should be turned off. Now DM verify, by default Android has something called file encryption. So for example, even if you format your phone and if you go for recovery, your phone won't recover. So that is the reason they basically have the file encryption, and this is for newer Android version. Previously we did not have these kind of features. To disable it, you just have to flash a zip file called DM verify zip file, which basically removes the encryption on your Android. So that is something that we will be going to do. Now to build a nethunter kernel, you can either use a pre-built images. So by default, there are two architectures, 64 and 32-bit, and depending on your operating system, you can either flash the zip file directly. If your device is supported, you will be able to see it in the pre-built. By default, my device was supported, but for Android 13, so there is a search bar available. You can search it. If you are planning to get a new device, I would recommend you to go with a device that is already supported, because any which ways you are going to port it, so you can do that. So as you can see, for my phone, Android 13 and 14 was available, but vendor has released Android 15 in stock ROM, and Android 16 is also over here. So we'll be compiling it for Android 16. So if you have a official pre-build available for your phone, then you can directly flash you. If you don't want to go into the technicality, you can do that. So first thing is to clone the GitHub repository for Kali nethunter kernel builder. So I'll do that. You need to have a Kali machine or a Linux machine to do it. I personally prefer it doing in virtual environment like VMware. I have already installed it and cloned it. So as you can see, if you type in -h, you will get the help command, and these are the phones that are supported. As I told you, the code name is used. For my phone, it was spaceware. Even if it is not supported, you can port it for your device, and then there are n number of operating Android versions that are available. So let's compile it. So first step is basically to run the build.py file, and you can give -k, that is the model, and for me it was spaceware. Then you can give the operating system name. -fs basically means to compile the whole Kali custom ROM, and you can do that. So Android 14 is by default available. There's nothing I'm doing right now, but this is something that was already released previously by a developer. If your phone is not supported, I'll be showing you how to recompile the kernel and how to build it. So once you do this, a full zip file, flashable zip file will be available. But again, the problem being my phone does not support custom ROM, and right now I'm running Android 15, and Android 14 and 13 builds are available. But even if I flash it, it won't work and it will basically break my device. So to fix this, what we have to do is, there are two options. Either I can downgrade to Android 14, and as you can see, a zip file is already created. This zip file is flashable, and I can use custom recovery to flash it. So there are two options. Either I can download to Android 14, or I can compile a kernel for Android 16, and by default Android 15 is supported on my phone. So there are two ways that I can do. Now once you compile the kernel, you have to flash the boot.img file, which is the bootloader or the boot section of it. Now by default, older Android has had like only one boot section, but now we have two partition, boot A and boot B. So boot B usually has the booting part and the recovery that is available, and also the boot animation and all those files. So first we'll be flashing that, and the second thing that we need to do is to flash the vendor boot. Now vendor boot goes into partition A, and vendor boot usually has things like the fast boot and all those things. So I'll quickly flash it, and I've already made a video on what is fast boot, what is ADB. You need these tools to communicate and flash things on your device. So I've already flashed vendor.boot, which basically has the partition A. So I flashed both partition A and partition B. I was running on stock Android 15, and it was rooted, so that's the reason I flashed the stock boot image once again, because I wanted to remove the root. And before going further, everything should be on the stock, so that you can modify and install it. So once this is done, by default you will already be running on stock. If you are not on stock Android, so in that case you will have to flash a stock ROM. Otherwise your phone might be bricked, because after rooting and after doing custom ROMs and everything, your device files are basically modified. So that is something that is mandatory, and I already have fastboot and EDB installed on my Mac. And I'll also show you how you can set up these environments on Linux, because those are required to build the kernel. After doing that, as I told you, there are two options I can do. First of all, I can either downgrade to Android 14 or recompile the Kali kernel for Android 16. And the next thing that you need to do is, all the Android versions have different partition sets and placement of files. So in that case, what you would have to do is either have the same Android version of the custom ROM or Kali nethunter that you're using, or you can modify the ROM for the version of Android that you are running. So first thing you need to do is go to bootloader mode, and what I personally did is I flashed Lineage OS, because it is running on Android 16. And every time I flash something, I usually do a factory reset, because setting up the device again is better than breaking the device. So that is what I usually do. So I did not have custom recovery. That's the reason I flashed a custom boot image in the previous section with fast boot, and that is why I was flashing it. Now the next thing, this is how the bootloader actually looks like, and this is the fast boot mode. So once you're into fast boot mode, you can flash the image file that are required. And the steps to install Kali nethunter is quite simple. You need a custom ROM, a custom recovery actually that allows you to flash it. You also need DM variety force encryption to be disabled. Now, as I told you, you can make a test kernel. Let's build a kernel and practically see it. There are two variants usually used: 32-bit ARM or ARM 64, which is the basic one. So you can either use these commands. So depending, let's say for example, in my case, ARM 64 is the architecture of my processor. So I can use a test kernel for ARM 64, and then you can just basically use the Kali nethunter kernel builder. So you need to pull the resources, the sources from the kernel. I'll be using Lineage OS sources because I want it for Android 16, and for Lineage OS, Android 16 is available. There is a different page available on Kali official website for porting it for a device that is not listed. So previously I showed you the device that is listed. Now let's take a look at the device that is not yet listed. So how to create a test kernel? Let's go and do it right on the system. You need to have Linux, because it is quite required, because some tools and the tool chains are available only for Linux. So I personally use Kali Linux. So first you need to clone the kernel builder, and once you open the build.sh, you will notice that there are few options. The first option that you need to do is set up the environment. Why? Because ADB and fastboot and all the tool chains that are required will be installed. So as you can see, once you do it, it will start downloading the packages that are required for compiling the kernel. And once you type in once you type in S and hit enter, it will automatically install. For me, it was already installed, so I will just type in N and skip the process of overwriting and downloading the image. GCC tool chain is also required to compile it, and there are few other tools that are required. So once this is done, you can either use a configuration that is available. So for example, in my case, nothing phone was space war was supported. So I'll just type in one, and I can use the config that is already available. If your phone does not have a config, don't worry. You can use a config that is similar to your phone. Let's say if you have a Samsung phone and already a Samsung config is available, you can just make changes in the config and you can do it. So there are a lot of configs that are available inside local.example config folder directory actually inside it. So you can either use those config and modify it, or if the config is not available, you can generate a new config. So as you can see in the local.config.example directory, there are a lot of configs available. So I'll again hit enter, and I'll be coming back, and you can either compile it from scratch, or the second option is to compile it from a previous run. So in my case, Android 14 and 13 was already available, so I can simply compile it using a previous run that I did, or you can recompile it. So you can save the config file and then move forward. What I personally prefer is to recompile the kernel, because it has new patches available. Now, as I told you, depending on the kernel type, the Linux kernel version, let's say it's 4.19, depending on the type of Linux kernel you have, you can add some patches that are recommended. So for example, for the latest 4.10, you will notice that there is an RTL patch for external Wi-Fi adapter. There is a Wi-Fi injection patch that is available, and there are few other patches as well. So depending on that, you can apply the patch, and you can just select the file.zip file, which I don't have right now, because you need to patch the kernel zip file. You just have to enter the name of the file and hit enter. It will basically patch it. So depending on the Linux kernel version, patches are available. You can go to the Android phone, and inside the about phone section, you will be able to see which Linux kernel is using. You can also use kernel manager. I usually use kernel manager, and then pull out the kernel's boot image and everything as a backup, and then modify those files. So let's say, for example, in my case, Android 15 was there and Linux kernel 4.8 was available. So what I did is I pulled that and then I applied the patches. So there are two variants of Kali available. The first one is the full flash variant, and then only the patched version. So depending on it, there are lots of patches available in Kali nethunter. So for example, for kernel 3.5, HID was not supported. So 3.8, 3.9 and 3.10 have the HID patches available. So you just have to do a bit of a research of what version of operating system is running, and then you can also add patches for root like Magic's patch, and I'm being old, I also use BusyBox. So that is how you compile it and then flash it. It's quite simple. Once the zip file is created, you can just flash it using the custom recovery that you have.